Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm Becca. Today I want to share with you my birth story of my beautiful daughter Nora. I'm so excited to share this story with you. It was very unexpected when she came, so that's why I've been pretty quiet over here. Honestly, it's been a huge adjustment. We're going to talk a little bit more about that maybe at the end, but I do want to give a pretty detailed birth story for anybody who enjoys listening to these, because I know that now that I've been through it, I love hearing other people's stories. So obviously the last time we chatted was my third trimester update, and I think that I was 34 weeks in that video, and literally a week later I ended up having my baby. She was born at 35 and 5 days gestation, and we've had a lot of back and forth conversations with our doctor and each other, wondering like, was the due date wrong? Was something off and we didn't know? But after those conversations and actually getting a pathology report from like my placenta and everything else, nothing was wrong for her to come early. Everything looked fine in the pathology report. I don't really know. And then additionally, my doctor just reassured us that every single scan we ever had, every single measurement we ever had, she was measuring right along at what she should have been. So it really is just that she just wanted to come early. She was done cooking, and she was actually born at 6 pounds 4 ounces. So I think she was like 17 inches long, so she was a pretty sizable baby for being technically a preterm baby. So babies aren't technically term until 37 weeks, and we were just a couple weeks short of that. But yeah, she was just ready to go, and we were really excited to have her. Everything happened really fast, so let's rewind and start from the moment that my water broke. So there wasn't a real moment until literally 10 p.m. A couple hours before my water broke on June 10th, where I looked at my stomach after I took a shower, and I was just thinking that it looked a little bit different. Like, it looked a lot lower than usual. I actually have a pretty long torso, so I feel like I looked like I was carrying low for most of the pregnancy anyway. But I just thought, let me just take a picture just in case. And I'm so glad that I took that pic, because it was actually the last photo of my bump. Oh, what are you upset about? Oh, you lost your binky. We're trying really hard to do the pacifier thing, but she just is not interested, but we are gonna continue trying. Okay, so I go to sleep. It's probably around 11 o'clock when I actually do fall asleep. And at about 1:30, this is all approximations because this was 2 months ago, and I've been through birth and postpartum and lots of sleep deprivation since then, so some of the details might be a bit foggy. But anyway, it was around like 1:30 when I felt like a little bit of a bloop. It's kind of like when you're on your period and you pass a blood clot. That's kind of what it felt like. So it was just like a tiny bit of water. It was obviously my water broke, so that's what it was. And so it woke me up. I was asleep when it happened, and it woke me up, and I remember my eyes just like shot open, and I was like, what was that? And then immediately after the little gush, I had a very light cramp, and I hadn't had any sort of cramping or bleeding throughout the entire pregnancy. So I knew, this is something to note. I didn't get out of bed to like check on anything, because I just was thinking I'm just gonna wait it out a little bit longer. So I fall back asleep, and it couldn't have been 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes. There was a bigger gush, and from that point I needed to get up and check it. And so I went to the bathroom, and I thankfully was wearing a panty liner, because if not I would not have seen. But I did have bloody show, which just means that there was pink, which indicates blood. I was like really freaked out, because in that moment I just knew that my water had broken, and I was extremely freaked out. Number one, because I wasn't expecting it, and number two, it was so early, and number three, your water breaks and you've been pregnant for however many months, and you're kind of wondering what that moment would be like the entire time you're pregnant, and then it finally happens, and you're just like, okay, I'm sitting here in my bathroom alone, and like it's go time. Things are starting. According to my birth plan that I had in my head, I didn't even have time to write it down yet. There's so much that I didn't have time to do, which I will probably discuss as we go along. Oh, you lost it again. So in my birth plan, I wanted to labor at home for as long as possible, but I figured that since I was early, like this was like preterm, that I needed to call into the nurse line just to see if they wanted me to come in. But I was fully expecting them to say, oh, just, stay at home, don't worry about it. come in when it feels like you can't talk anymore. But when we were talking to them and I was explaining everything, they suggested that we come in just in case. And so we did, and it was probably around 2 a.m. at that point. So we drive in. We didn't bring a hospital bag. We didn't bring the car seat, like nothing. The car seat, I mean, it was out of the box and we assembled it, but it was not installed. We had never installed it before because, again, 35 weeks. A hospital bag wasn't even packed, so even if I wanted to bring it, I couldn't have. Anyway, so we get there, they check us in. They're doing like all the different methods to check if my water had broken. Like they took like the slide test where they make you cough on a slide to see if any amniotic fluid comes out. And then that wasn't really showing much. I could tell that the nurse wanted to send me home. Like I could just tell that she was like, I've seen this before, send her home. You know what I mean? You know when you just get the vibe. But I was like, no, if it's not like my water breaking, then I literally don't know what this is, because I know I didn't pee myself. Like I know I didn't. I've had really great bladder control. So that's just what I kept telling her. And she's like, okay, well, we'll do like a more in-depth exam. So then they brought in a doctor and did like a speculum exam. So basically they put a speculum inside and then look into your I don't know. They look inside, okay? And then they swab it and then they test the fluid, and then it ended up being amniotic fluid. So at that point, I was expecting them to say, okay, well, yes, your water broke and you can go home until you feel like you can't talk through your contractions, and then you can come back. But that was not the case. Like they actually wouldn't let me leave because we were preterm. We needed to get things moving. So pretty much from there, they're like, we're gonna admit you and you're probably going to need to go on Pitocin to start your labor, because if the baby isn't born within a certain amount of hours after your water breaks, you're at a high risk for infection, which I was aware of that. But my plan going into this was to have a very low intervention unmedicated birth. That's what I wanted. That's what I had been preparing for. I had studied some hypnobirthing and I was doing some prenatal yoga that was, I think, hypnobirthing informed. Like it was very similar to things I was learning in the book that I was reading, which, by the way, the book that I read to prepare was Your Baby, Your Birth by Holly DeCruz. I loved that book so much. I got to read so many positive birth stories even like where it didn't go as expected, and it was still very positive. So anyway, I would really recommend it if you are in pregnancy and you're wanting to do something more low intervention, or even if you're not and you just want to look into hypnobirthing. I think it's great. Sorry, brief intermission because baby was crying. Baby needs to eat. Okay, so basically from the moment that they told me that I was going to need to be admitted, I was going to need to be induced, all of these things, I kind of just went into survival mode. I don't know how else to describe it, but I was basically just willing to do anything to make sure that Nora was going to be safe and not under any distress. And so I wasn't really able to think clearly through all of the things that I had learned in hypnobirthing. And that's why I'm so thankful that my partner, my husband, Daniel, was very, very hands-on and willing to advocate and ask questions that like I didn't really have the mind to do. So we were able to have the baby in the low intervention birth room, which is what I planned on doing from the beginning. Basically, it's a room where there's a bed, there's a bathtub, there's a birthing stool, basically just like a wider variety of options for laboring and having your baby. And so if it weren't for Daniel like saying, hey, we want that room, I just would have not done it, because I was thinking, well, if I need an induction, I probably shouldn't go into this low intervention room. So anyway, we go up to the room and immediately the doctor on call comes in and is trying to tell me how we need to start Pitocin, because at that point I was only dilated to a 1 and my water had broken like an hour or two before that. So we weren't really sure how my body was going to respond. My husband actually asked what would be the risk of waiting a couple hours to see how my body responded. And I think that he did that because of this acronym we learned called BRAIN. He asked them what the risk was, and they didn't know off the top of their heads, which is fine. But they went back and they got the research and they came back and said that it was like a 1% chance of something bad happening, for lack of a better word. They said even 1% is enough for them to want to like encourage me to get Pitocin, and we decided that 1% was not enough for us, so we just didn't get it. Contingent on if I wasn't progressing, then we would be willing to do it. And once I was like all settled into the room and everything was like fine, Daniel went back home because I actually had a list of what I was going to pack in the hospital bag. I didn't actually pack it yet, again, 35 weeks, and I just sent him the list and he packed the bag and brought everything in and checked on the dogs, called family members, let them know. His mom started driving down and he kind of like handled all of that kind of stuff while I was at the hospital. Labor at that point, like I was getting contractions like maybe every like, I don't know, 2, 3 to 5 minutes. They were pretty far apart still, and they were manageable at that point. I mean, they felt pretty manageable for most of the labor, but at that point I was fine being by myself. I was just listening to the Freya app, and basically you open the app and it's a continuous meditation. Like it just plays for hours and hours if you need it to. And every time you have a contraction or a surge, as they say in hypnobirthing, you press the button and then it starts counting for you. And so you inhale for 4, exhale for 8. And I think you can adjust the app to be like 3 or 6 or whatever you want to do. And so that's what I was doing for maybe like 2 or 3 hours while he was like taking care of things at home. But when he got back, we had maybe like another an hour or 2 of the same, and we were just kind of resting. And then when things started picking up a lot, and they were not doing that many cervical checks because, well, they didn't want to do them because my water had broken. But there did come a point where things were sort of picking up a lot, and they needed to know whether or not they were gonna call in my doctor. When she checked me, I was at a 6, so I was still progressing at about a centimeter an hour. And I think that's the point when she called my doctor to come in. This is where things started to really pick up and it becomes much more of a blur. I pretty much had my eyes closed from, you know, that point until the baby came out because I was just trying to be so focused. But one of the things that I was most nervous about in labor was throwing up, because I hate throwing up in general, and I was very sick through most of my first and half of my second trimester. So it was kind of like, I don't know, exposure therapy in a way. So it wasn't like as scary as it would have been for me, let's say a year ago. But when it actually happened in labor, like I did end up throwing up, and I didn't really eat much either because I just was nauseous and I didn't feel well. So they did give me some medicine, like what was I taking? Zofran through my IV. And it helped a little bit, but generally, you know, when you're going through labor, I don't know how much that stuff actually helps. I ended up throwing up. After that, things really kicked off and started moving really fast. And one of the sensations that I just kept getting over and over and over again was that I had to pee. So I kept finding myself like wandering into the bathroom, like trying so hard to pee. And it was like the pees that you have when you have a UTI, like there wasn't much coming out. And my husband would go in there with me, you know. Obviously everyone is like aware that the woman who's like deeply in labor is going to sit on a toilet. Everyone's following you in to make sure that you're not gonna have the baby on the toilet. And so I was just walking back and forth from the bathroom to the bed, and a lot of my laboring happened actually side lying in the bed with a peanut ball between my legs. I didn't really know like what laboring was going to look like actually in practice, because I had taken a birthing class with my husband and we learned about some different like birthing positions and laboring positions. But when it really came down to it, I was so exhausted that I just wanted to be laying down. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, well, I'm going, you know, the unmedicated route. I want to be able to move if I can. And I did do a little bit of like hands and knees, but generally I was mostly laying down, and that was fine for me. I was exhausted again. It was also convenient to labor that way because my husband could apply counter pressure to my back because I was having back labor, which was really unpleasant. I honestly feel like the contractions in themselves weren't really that painful for me. It was the back labor that was the real killer for me. But my husband was able to basically just like ram his fist into my sacrum anytime I had a contraction. And we sort of had like this code language that we were going through because the nurses told me to say as little as possible. Like, don't speak in complete sentences. Don't worry about how anyone else is feeling. I am a people pleaser by nature. I didn't want to be short with anybody. I didn't want to appear like rude or anything like that, which I really should not have been worrying about that while I was like literally in labor. These people understand completely. But anyway, so they just told me like, don't try to speak in complete sentences. Just like literally like just like grunt commands, like tell us what to do and we will do it. And so with my husband, like I was chewing on ice because I was so thirsty, but also so nauseous. And the ice was, I don't know, it was nice to have at least a little bit of something going in. And then also he was putting like a cold cloth on my neck And anytime I was in a contraction, I would want the cold cloth on my neck, and I had my little stroller fan hooked onto the bed, and I wanted like to be cooled down, and then as soon as the contraction was over, I would get really cold, and so I'd rip it all off, turn off the fan, and it was just kind of like that for the whole thing. And it is true when they say that when you're going through labor, you just lose all sense of like, not dignity, but like, I didn't care who saw what, okay? And I'm not like really a shy person in regards to that anyway. Like, I was the naked friend growing up, but these are strangers and you're like in a medical setting. It's like, I don't know. I do get a little bit shy at the doctor, like, you know, during an exam or something like that. But it's true, like, I literally did not care who saw what. There was people coming in and out of the room, not that many because it's a low intervention room and they tried hard to keep like the traffic to a minimum. I honestly couldn't tell you like who they were, what they looked like, because I just did not care. I was just laying there with my eyes closed with my Freya app, with my fan and my ice chips, living my best life. And there was a moment when I turned to the nurse and I said, is it gonna get worse than this pain-wise? Or is this pretty much where the pain caps out? Like, I think that was when I was around 6 centimeters. I asked that like after they checked me. And she told me that no, the contractions, you're pretty much feeling the height of the pain. They're just gonna get closer together, maybe more intense, but like pain-wise, this is pretty much where you're gonna be at. And for me, I was handling the pain pretty well because once the contraction is done, you can kind of just chill for a while and rest. Thankfully, I did have pretty consistent rest periods between my contractions. It wasn't until the very, very end where they were super close together and I didn't really have much of a rest. But I do remember even when I was, you know, pushing, like ring of fire pushing, I still had moments where I stopped and breathed and just like didn't push or didn't do anything. So let's move on to the big part of labor. So I was on the toilet one time just like trying to pee, or I don't even know what I was doing, and my doctor came and she's like, well, this is a surprise. Like, she was just like the sweetest woman, and she helped me get up and sit over onto the birthing stool, and she basically just told me like, if the toilet feels comfortable for you, then the birthing stool is going to be great, and it's a lot safer than trying to deliver a baby in a toilet. So I sat on the birthing stool for a while and labored there, and I think honestly I was on it for maybe an hour, maybe 2. Again, timing is very blurry because my eyes were closed and I was not paying attention to anything other than like Daniel, doctor's voice, and my body. And I went from a 7 to a 9.5 during that time. So that was a pretty quick like growth, and I was having some really big contractions during that time. I did feel one time the sensation to poop, and like typically when you feel that like pressure to poop, that's when the baby is like really, really down there and ready to come out. So I did get that like one time during that session on the birth stool, and my doctor checked me again, and at that point I was 9.5 centimeters, and I just wasn't progressing from there. And I just remember like getting a little weepy because I was just so tired. I had been, you know, actively laboring for a while at that point, and I was just really tired, which is normal. Sometimes when that happens, like when things sort of plateau, it's good to switch positions because that can help, I don't know, move things along. So they walked me back over to the bed. I went back side lying, and I was actually able to fall asleep between my contractions that I was experiencing at 9.5 centimeters. And that was because I was so relaxed from hypnobirthing. And one of the main parts of hypnobirthing is when you are tensing up, when you're like scared or like screaming, all of these things, it promotes adrenaline in your body. Like, it pushes adrenaline, and adrenaline is what you don't want to be experiencing during labor because it sort of pauses things, because your body needs oxytocin to, you know, continue this process, and adrenaline is like a killer of oxytocin essentially. So it was really, really important to me that I stayed as calm as possible through the entire process. Like, I kept my jaw slack, I kept my mouth open pretty much the entire time. And somebody on TikTok actually told me that your jaw and your pelvic floor muscles are connected. I did not know this, but it makes a lot of sense why they tell you to like keep your jaw loose in hypnobirthing, because it's all connected. So yeah, anytime I think about like 9.5 centimeters dilated for birth, I think that the person is going to be like screaming and having like a really horrible time, which like it was intense. But there did come a point in that 9.5 centimeters where I was able to just lay there and sleep. And of course I woke up every time there was a contraction, but the contractions were coming a little bit further apart, so I was able to catch a little bit of a snooze and just rest. What was happening was I was getting that pee sensation a lot at that point, and I didn't want to pee myself. And I don't know why I was holding on to that little bit of like dignity that I wasn't gonna pee myself, because I was literally laying there in a bra, no bottoms on, nothing but a bra on. I don't even know why I had the bra on at that point. With a peanut ball between my legs, like literally everything on full display, but I didn't want to pee myself, okay? So I just don't know why. And I feel like that's the reason why I was a little bit stalled at 9.5 for so long, because I think it was maybe like an hour or two. Was it? I don't know. The timeline is so fuzzy. But I was stalled at 9.5 for a while. And once I just let go and I was like, you know what, if I pee, I pee. It's fine. Once I let go of that, I started progressing again, and contractions got pretty intense at that point. And so everybody sensed that. So they got me back over to the stool, because that's where I decided I wanted to have her. It was just like the most comfortable place. It kind of goes like very blurry at this point because it was very intense. My eyes were like locked closed, but Daniel was on this side of me, and then there was a nurse right here, and then like my nurse that had been with me the whole time was like over here, and then my doctor was obviously like bent down in front of me. And so she was doing some like perineal massages with like some oil, and just like making sure that like taking care of that area to reduce tearing and stuff like that, which I really appreciate. By the way, my doctor is an incredible woman. Like I love her so much. I'm sad that I'm not gonna have any more kids while I live here. I really wish that she could deliver all of my kids because she's amazing. Anyway, so at this point, I start having the fetal ejection reflex, which is what my doctor really wanted me to wait for. Like the first time I was on the birth stool, I was like begging her. I was like, please let me push. And she's like, I really don't want you to push. I don't think your body's ready yet. Like I really want you to finish dilating to the full 10. And then when I was dilated to the full 10, I did start getting the fetal ejection reflex, which if you don't know what that is, basically it's your body just pushing the baby out. And it was like an uncontrollable like thing. Like I just like my body, like I just like lost control of my body. Like it would like make me like grunt really loud and like kind of double over a little bit. And it was just so crazy. And like when I felt that sensation and I pushed with it, I could like feel her coming down, which was the craziest sensation ever. Like nothing will ever compare to that besides having another kid. Like it was just the wildest sensation. It was the most like cool display of what like the human body is capable of. Like it was just so cool. So I pushed for about 10 minutes, which equaled out to about 5 pushes, I think. And the ring of fire happens twice. Like, I don't know, I feel like people talk about the ring of fire as like one thing. Maybe they're referring to like the head and the shoulders, but I'm not gonna lie, like when the head came out, I thought I was gonna die. Like it hurt so bad. Like nothing will ever compare to that, honestly. It happens really fast. Like for me, she didn't sit there with her head like crowning for a super long time. But once the head passed, there was a little bit of a break in sensation, and then the shoulders came, and that was like probably worse. And most of the labor, like I would like grunt and growl and like use just like low tone sounds. I wasn't like I would do more like and that kind of was all out the window at that point. Like I was like screaming, and like I kept telling myself that I was gonna be okay, which was like a funny thing. Like I had never practiced that in hypnobirthing, but I just kept telling myself like, it's okay, Becca, like you're gonna be okay, it's fine. Like I just kept saying that over and over again, and my doctor was like, yeah, it's good, you're fine. Like everyone was just like joining in. Anyway, but as soon as her shoulders passed, she just like slips out. Like the doctor just kind of, guides her out, and she was plopped onto my stomach, and it was just the craziest, wildest, like, oh my gosh, this just happened moment. And I didn't have like an instant love. Like it was mostly like shock. Like I was just in pure shock. And like obviously I was like excited to see her, but I was like, oh my God, this just happened. And for most of that like pushing process, I didn't even register like many of the people around me. I do remember opening my eyes like 1 or 2 times and seeing how many people were in the room, because she obviously was preterm, and so they had to have the NICU team in the room with us when she was born so they could check her over. And so there was even more people than usual because of that. And just remember, like, in the moments they were like, she was on me and they were like stimulating her body, and I just looked around and I was like, well, sorry guys, I know I got a little, screamed a little bit, and they're like, you're fine, that was incredible, you did amazing, which I'm sure they tell everybody, because any way you have a baby is incredible. Literally any way a baby is born is remarkable. From there, they cleaned her off. We did like delayed cord clamping, so we waited a little while and then eventually cut the cord, and they took her over to the table to check her over. And she didn't have to stay in the NICU. She was, honestly, she looked like a full-term baby. So there was no issues there. The placenta delivered like minutes later, and I really didn't even feel it. It honestly just like fell out. So no pain there. I didn't have to go on Pitocin or anything to get that out. It just kind of plopped out, which was crazy. And she showed it to us, and it was just like, wow, like an entire organ in addition to my baby is like just absolutely insane. So anyway, they walked me back over to the bed and we sat down, and then we started trying to get her to latch for breastfeeding, and she did actually latch right away, no issues. And honestly, we are really lucky that breastfeeding hasn't been too big of an issue for us, especially considering she was preterm. Oh, what do you think? So honestly, she has acted like a term baby basically since she was born. There's been a few things that were like, yeah, she's definitely premature, but most things she's just rode right along, and I haven't had any issues. So we had our golden hour in the delivery room and did some skin to skin. She did some skin to skin with dad, and then we went up to the postpartum room. And I have to say that the nurses in the postpartum unit were just so sweet. Like every single nurse that I interacted with was just amazing. I have to say that labor and delivery nurses are angels on earth. So if you are a labor and delivery nurse or an OBGYN or anybody who's involved in delivering children, you guys are amazing. We actually were able to leave within 24 hours, thankfully, even though she was preterm. They were taking her blood sugar about every single time she ate to just keep, you know, checking on her levels and everything, and she was passing with flying colors. So they were able to release us at 24 hours. I still can't believe like how quickly everything happened. She was born less than 12 hours after my water broke, which is insane. I mean, for my first baby, I have heard that your labors just get faster and faster every time, you know, with subsequent children. So I'm a little nervous about the next one. And also with her being preterm, you know, I could have another preterm baby. So I'm just like keeping my fingers crossed that next time I'm pregnant, I make it at least again to 35 and 5, hopefully further along than that. But there was, I have to say, in the postpartum period, there was a little bit of a, maybe not even a little bit, there was a lot of bit of a mourning period of being pregnant, because I didn't feel like I had, I don't know, I didn't have the proper chance to like close that chapter and say goodbye, which I don't know how many pregnant people do, because, you know, labor just happens. Or if you get induced or you have a scheduled C-section, I guess that's different. You had a date on your calendar that you could like look at and know that's when your baby was going to come. But generally for spontaneous labor, it's like it just happens and you just have to go with it. And so I think for probably like a week after she was born, I was really like just in shock and not sure how to like move about the world, not being pregnant anymore. Like I cried a lot about the fact that my stomach was small again, and well, it wasn't like small again, but you know what I mean, like flat. There was no baby in it. I very much so still had like a stomach situation, as like pretty much everybody does after they have a baby. But yeah, I was just really sad that she wasn't in my belly anymore, which was weird to me because I was pretty miserable the last 2 weeks that I was pregnant with the pelvic pain and everything else. So it's just, yeah, everything happened so fast and I didn't really have time to process. I just had to get down and do it. Glad that I didn't freak out at all at any point. I didn't cry. I didn't get scared. Besides the moment when my water broke and I realized what happened, I was really scared. But from then on, I just kind of like just did it. And I feel like this is a common experience for a lot of women who, you know, have babies. You just kind of do it. And I just think it's a testament to how, I don't know, just how cool our bodies are, that we just know what to do even if we don't. Did my voice just crack? I'm out of the baby blues period and definitely like keeping an eye out for postpartum postpartum anxiety and depression. I do deal with anxiety and depression normally, so it has been kind of hard for me to tell, like, is this my normal baseline or is this postpartum anxiety and depression? You know what I mean? So I don't know. I think that I'm doing like pretty okay as far as recovery goes. Physically, recovery was fine. I didn't really have anything like too intense going on there. I had a very small tear and it healed on its own. I didn't need stitches. But emotionally, recovery has been, I feel like, just prolonged and just different because she came so much earlier than expected and we didn't have much prepared at all. Like the first week of her being alive, we were trying to figure out like a changing table, a changing mat, diapers, a rocking chair. Like there's just so many things that we didn't have that were really, honestly, in my opinion, essential to the comfort of a postpartum mom. Yeah, I have had a really like interesting postpartum experience. If you guys want to hear about like the 4th trimester, I still have another month of it. The baby is, the baby, Nora, is 8 weeks old. And so I think that I still have another 4 weeks of the 4th trimester. And so maybe at the end of that, I can talk a little bit more about our postpartum experience. But generally, it has been pretty good. Couple of blips here and there, but anyway, I can talk more details about that later if you want to hear it. And yeah, that's the birth story and then some. So I hope that you enjoyed hearing this very chatty story. I'm so excited to chat with you guys about this and just, yeah, have this out there for anybody who wants to hear a positive birth story. Basically, the bottom line that I've learned from sharing my story with people and also hearing other people's story is that labor is gonna go how it goes. There's not a ton that we can do to control it. So you just kind of have to roll with the punches and just go with it and be as flexible as you can. And I feel like I was definitely able to do that and just be willing to change the plan if I needed to. But thankfully, the plan pretty much went exactly how I would have wanted it to, which was great. So very thankful to Nora for you know, staying stable throughout the entire process, because if something with her went wrong, then I'm sure that it could have gone very, very differently. So very thankful for my little fighter here and her beautiful little spirit. So thank you so much for watching this video. And if you enjoyed it, give it a like so that YouTube knows that you liked this video and maybe we'll show it to more people. And I will see you guys in the next video. Hopefully I'll be getting back to posting on this channel soon, but I am kind of taking a break from making like extra content outside of my main channel. So if you want to see what we're up to, you can check out my main channel, De La Plants, and hopefully I will be back here within the next couple of weeks posting vlogs and everything else. I just kind of want to be able to sleep a little bit longer at night before I start sewing and like doing all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I'm sure that you understand if you have had kids or have had anyone near you have kids. It's a very exhausting period. So hopefully I will get back to doing the things that I love soon, but for now I'm just really happy to be able to spend so much time with Nora. Anyway, I'm never gonna stop talking if I don't say goodbye, so goodbye.